I gotta play the beta for the Expanse Osiris Reborn, an upcoming third-person action RPG set in the Expanse universe. Now, I'm a big fan of the Expanse. I've read the books and I've watched the show 2 times through, and I think it's some of the best hard sci-fi writing and execution of our times, which makes me extremely excited for any sort of upcoming Expanse content, but it also means that I'm gonna be a bit more protective of this IP that I love so much and how it's represented in a video game. So I'm definitely here with a critical eye and not just the fanboy eye. Now, Owlcat Games did hook me up with a beta key early so I could get my impressions ready. The beta should be live for anyone to check it out, although it is locked behind a pre-order bundle. And I'm actually surprised by how early they're doing this closed beta test, considering the game's release window is spring of 2027. Owlcat has specifically mentioned that they are doing this for actual feedback and not just to promote the game, which, if true, is good on them. I think more developers should show betas off earlier rather than doing something, say, 3 to 4 months before launch where substantial changes are really just out of the question. Now, this beta was quite a short play session, about only 1 hour of gameplay, so drawing any conclusions about the overall progression system or overall narrative is super hard, impossible here, really. I felt like it ended just moments after I started playing, which overall I think is a good sign. I definitely would have wanted to play a lot more to see where the story was going. The story itself takes place in parallel with the events from the books and the show. In fact, it takes place right after the event on Eros Station, which is pretty early on in the Expanse lore, and it focuses a bit more on the evil corporate interest side of that narrative. At least I think so far is where it's going, which frankly wasn't explored too deeply in the show, so I think there's plenty of room there to craft some fun narratives. As for how appealing this might be for somebody completely unfamiliar with the show, I don't know. It's really hard to say, but I did think the most interesting parts of the plot were the fact that it was surrounding the Eros event and what that means, because there's so much depth and lore behind that already. So I'm sure that will be explained in the game, but from this little snippet, it's hard to know. Now, you play as a Pinkwater mercenary who has commandeered an experimental ship, and you're basically being dragged into a system-wide conspiracy. And if you're not familiar with the Expanse, well, this universe takes place around 300 years in the future, where Earth has expanded deep into our solar system, and Mars has become a major power, as well as the Belter factions who mine the valuable resources needed for space travel and warfare. Now, visually, Osiris Reborn looks great. They're using Unreal Engine 5, and there's definitely some budget being put into this project. It is not hard to see. And they're really taking a lot of great styling cues from the show. I like the spacesuits and the way that the characters look. Although I might argue the level of space grunge might seem a little bit lighter compared to some of what this show portrays. Granted, they spend a lot more time with the Belter factions. And some of the combat visuals are really cool. Maybe a little scripted feeling, but I gotta say, blowing chunks of the space station apart in Zero-G just looks badass. It's very clear from the gameplay, and even openly talked about by the developers, that they're going for sort of a Mass Effect vibe. You and your crew gallivanting around, taking on missions and tasks. And although I didn't get to experience this in the beta, you can grow your crew along the way, and there'll be multiple companions that you have the option to add depending on the choices that you make in the game. But for the beta hour-long experience, it's just you and your twin Jay at the start. You're Pinkwater mercenaries that narrowly escaped death and are now being hunted down. And you can pick a few character and class options at the start that'll give you a different appearance and background and abilities. I went for the Belter officer, as Belters are just inherently cooler, and I assumed officer would just give me more pew pew. Now, right away, I do gotta say that the dialogue stood out immediately as feeling a little bit awkward. As the show acting and writing is so good, I was kind of expecting something on a similar level. Maybe with motion capture and real actor performances in the game would have been super cool, but instead I found the voice acting to be quite stiff and the character animations to be oddly disconnected at times. The pacing of the dialogue trees means all sentences or phrases just sort of have to come to an awkward, abrupt end, then you wait, and then somebody else starts talking, and it just feels very unnatural. I don't like the tempo of it. It feels very Bethesda-y in nature, and I was sort of hoping that this game might be able to get past that, but they're kind of sticking to classic gameplay character dialogue, which in my opinion feels out of place for the Expanse universe. For example, at the start you dock at a station and then you're engaging in small talk before telling somebody that some of their friends are dead, and then the dialogue quickly just moves on to ship salvage rights.
We didn't know these guys like you did, Safar. Still, we're so sorry.
Such cruel irony. Not to die in combat, but on vacation. Report to Director O'Connell ASAP. I just have one question. Is this ship yours?
It's just kind of odd and unnatural. It's not out of the ordinary for a general video game, but when comparing it to the incredible characters and performances from the Expanse show, I just can't help feel but a bit underwhelmed by it all. The Expanse show and books has a lot of hard characters and death and sorrow, but the actors really make you feel the weight of it, and I just didn't feel much of that coming from these game performances so far. I'm not saying that I couldn't develop an emotional attachment to some of these characters at some point, but so far it just feels a little too wooden for that to happen. Now, it doesn't take long before you're thrown into a battle for your life. The combat is pretty standard cover shooter mechanics, with some slow time and party abilities to mix it up. You can use your Twin J's abilities in combat to augment what you're capable of doing, and I imagine this expands further once you expand your party. It was nice to see that the abilities legitimately do help in combat. You can't just brute force your way through with guns the whole time, especially when facing some of the bullet spongier foes that have a lot of armor. The cover movement is certainly a little bit clunky at times. It just for whatever reason didn't feel quite as clean as some other games do it, and some of the ADS mechanics are a bit awkward as well, where your bullets will hit a wall instead of the enemy that you're aiming at, so some of the alignment with the optics seems a little bit off here. Definitely some room for improvement. Again, beta well before release. Now the spacewalk sequences are certainly the highlight of the experience for me. Being able to walk around a curving surface of the space station with your mag boots is definitely cool. The explosions and debris in space also looks really cool, and if the game does more of this, I'm absolutely down for it. Now, in a full floating zero-G sequence where you have to drift from one side of the station to another, I was expecting to have a bit more control over my character, but instead the game shows its nature here a bit more, and the movement corridor is just really heavily restricted. I was hoping that this game might end up being a bit more open, but many of the game's paths and sequences come down to pretty narrow choices, like you can either go left or right. You're not going to be exploring a big open environment, at least not in the beta so far. That said, you do get to make choices in the game that will lead to different outcomes for your character and party and other characters in the game. Like, people could be dead and you will never have access to them again if you choose wrong, which is interesting, and I'm curious to see how much they explore this. At the moment, it feels like you can either go left or right, and both may end up at a similar destination at the end of the day, with certain people being alive or dead or certain cutscenes playing over others, but ultimately I think you're still on the same narrative path, but we'll just have to wait and see for the full game to come out on how much you can control that. Now, as you explore, you can pick up and find better gear, new guns, ammo from enemies, loot nearby containers for meds and crafting supplies, or search around for codes that'll open up locked armory containers. There weren't really any surprising mechanics here, just kind of standard action adventure stuff. There was also weapon upgrades and some decent variety to the kit building options here, so it looks like you could certainly push your characters down more specific paths. Sadly, the beta doesn't let you get into the larger party dynamics too much, which I gather is one of the bigger appeals of the game in the long run. I could see the combat getting much more challenging, and having a full crew with different abilities for slow time and real-time combat could be a lot of fun, but again, I wasn't able to progress towards that in the beta. The enemies in the beta so far have been a bit more on the typical side, guys with shields in front of them, tanky armored guys, sniper guy, grunt guy. The tanks at least make you have to rethink your takedown methods, as your small arms fire just isn't going to cut it for them. But beyond that, I didn't find the combat all too interesting. There's definitely environmental, like explosive elements that you can trigger at the right time to sort of maximize your damage potential. I'm certainly willing to give the devs the benefit of the doubt here, in that it is just the start of the game, and hopefully the combat evolves in some more interesting ways further on. And on that note, it's really hard to give this game a solid vibe check at the start. I couldn't tell you with any certainty whether or not this is going to be a great great game or if it's going to get boring real fast. With only an hour of gameplay, it's impossible to make that call. It does certainly look and feel like an Expanse experience, and the production quality seems generally quite high, but I wasn't overly impressed with the characters or the gameplay yet. But I'm certainly willing to give Owlcat the time to dial things in, and they do have that time. Showing this game this far ahead of launch can be a scary thing for a dev team to do, and if they are planning to actually work on some of these key areas of the game, I think the experience could absolutely improve from here on. If I was going to focus on any one thing in the game, it would really just be looking at improving the facial animations and voice acting in lines to just help the characters feel more alive and expressive. It's going to be really hard to care about your crew and other people in the universe when the animation doesn't hit at that higher level. It's not to say that the animation's really bad or anything, but it's just not at the level where I'm starting to think of these people as characters versus just game NPCs. Let me know your thoughts though. Any other Expanse fans out there do the pre-order package and get into the closed beta early? Do you like the game? Do you hate the game? Do you think it looks like it has a lot of potential? I personally am looking forward to seeing where this story goes. I love the Expanse that much that I'm absolutely willing to give this game some of my time, but I'd definitely be curious to hear if it looks appealing to somebody who's never watched the Expanse show or read any of the books. Let me know in the comments. And up next, check out this crazy game that just launched that is a black and white 1930s animation style detective noir game where you play as a mouse. Absolutely worth your time. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap signing off.